March and April were busy months for our family, and so I didn't get to make a March video. So I'm going to cram every read that I did in March and April and share with you every book I read, reviewed, and that I recommend to anyone who's watching. Praying the Bible was the first book that I read in March, and this book was so helpful. I'm going to say this a lot about books and why they're my favorite books is that they are actionable. So when you read, you get this grand vision of how you want to live your life, and then you feel like once you start implementing it, it's so impossible and it's not practical or relatable. This is not one of those books. I feel like if you want to enrich your prayer life in any way, whether you're just starting or you've been praying for a long time and you feel like it's growing stale, I found this so easy to implement in my life, and I'm still practicing and implementing what I learned in the book. And I feel like it's so easy to get back on track. You know, there were a couple weeks where I felt like I learned this from the book and then maybe I got off track, and it was so easy to get back on track. And so I think it's an asset to anyone's Christian journey. And then God's Smuggler was a missionary biography that follows a missionary who was a missionary at the time of the Cold War. And so he is giving Bibles to persecuted churches behind the Iron Curtain. And this was one of the most fascinating biographies I think I've read because it read entertaining, like fiction. And so if you are someone who's like, I want to jump into reading, I want to jump into Christian books, but man, I struggle with like really getting into a book, I think this is a great start for you because it reads like a fiction story, but it is someone's actual real life and testimony, which is crazy to me. So the writers very obviously have a gift for writing, and that's something else I personally look for. There are lots of people with great messages, but everyone varies in their actual storytelling skills. And so I'm always appreciative when I pick up a book that is enriched with good storytelling, and this is one of those books. No Drama Discipline. I read this, as I explained in my TBR video, I'm a toddler parent, and so we are in the thick of how are we going to discipline? What is the best way to do it? What's the best way to go about it for us, for them, for the long haul? And I feel like I grabbed some really great tools. There is discourse on spanking, on timeouts, and things that even if you come out disagreeing with what they say it has great information for you to consider when making those decisions. I found it so helpful, and we grabbed some great tools from that to be able to implement at home with our toddler. And then Love to Life by Ann Voskamp. I know I've talked about it so much on my page because I love Ann Voskamp's writing, and whereas one might be drawn to fiction and storytelling through prose, Ann Voskamp is a poetry writer. She writes really beautiful verses, but it's written in a prose format, like it's a devotional, but her sentences are just so packed full of beautiful words. And I read her devotional throughout the 40 days of the Lent season. It's not technically in line with Lent. Lent might be associated with a specific church or denomination, but it's the practice of readying yourself for Easter and worshiping God leading up into Easter Sunday. And I couldn't think of a better tool to use to do that on the way to Easter. I feel like once it got to Easter, I was just full of awe and wonder about Jesus's life, death, and resurrection. And so I recommend that. You can read it any time of year. It's not really specifically designed so that you can't read it outside of Easter, but it would be something great to pick up during that Easter season next year. I tried to branch out, find a fiction book, and read Someone Like You by Kingsbury. I've heard about her a lot, and then Someone Like You was made into a movie. I didn't post about this because I don't want to post about books that I didn't like and that I don't recommend. So that would turn into sort of a bashing thing. But I will share in these videos because I figure if you're watching the video, you're pretty invested in what I'm reading and what I like to read and what I think about these books. And Someone Like You, I didn't quite enjoy because it is a sort of Christian book. And the way that relationships were gone about in this book, I struggled to find how they were in line with Christian values. For example, the main character is engaged to a man and then she falls in love with another man, and so she breaks off the engagement. It just doesn't feel fruitful of how real life relationships work, and then two, how Christian relationships work. And then I struggled a little bit with some of the storytelling. I said before that I really like good storytelling. There were genuinely confusing details within the plot and the scenes of the story that just took me out of the story so much. But I will say it's a compelling plot. That's why I picked it up. That's why movie producers picked it up. And I feel like I actually recommend the movie if you're just looking for romance stories. Yeah, I feel like I recommend the movie because they fixed a lot of the issues that are in the writing. And they make one of the characters, it's her boyfriend, not her fiance. And it's still weird, but I feel like it fixes it a little bit. So anyway, there's my thoughts on that for anyone that actually cared. Made for People. This author is becoming one of my favorite Christian authors because of his storytelling. Also, he is just so good at making big concepts simple. So this is the writer of Habits of the Household, another book that I was raving about that I felt was so helpful to me. This is another book that is so actionable after you read it, that you can read it and you don't have to tackle the whole thing. And he's not really painting this picture of you have to live life exactly like this. He's just giving you ideas and a vision for maybe some new ways that you can look at community and friendship and things you can implement and ways that you can start to cultivate your own meaningful relationships. And I feel like this was so helpful. I thought that it would feel cliche to me. There are lots of books on the topic of community. We've all heard, if you've been in church, you've heard lots of sermons on the importance of biblical community. You would still benefit from this book. Like, don't think just because you've heard those sermons, you've read those books, that you wouldn't benefit from this. I think you would. So the next one is Biblical Theology. And I explained in my post about this. I thought that I'm following this specific reading challenge for the year. And I thought that this book was like a work of biblical theology, but it's a book about biblical theology. The tagline is How the Church Faithfully Teaches the Gospel. And this was another short read, about as short as praying the Bible. And I thought this was so helpful. It is a really condensed, easy to read overview of how the church should teach biblical theology. And I think this is really beneficial to any church member, churchgoer, Christian, whatever you consider yourself, a leader, a volunteer, you would benefit from it. It's also great for those who maybe are interested in teaching the Bible, whether that's in a small group, because if you're a small group leader, you are teaching and you're in a role where you're sharing the gospel with others. And so you would benefit from looking at this and really asking yourself, am I aligning my teaching or even my devotional time, just me personally reading the Bible, am I aligning that with the Bible's point, the Bible's big story, which is Jesus? It's all about Jesus. And I say that in a simplistic way to where you would think you wouldn't benefit from reading it, but you would. I think any Christian would benefit from reading it. And speaking of books, I think any Christian would benefit from reading. My last book that I just finished is My Name is Hope by John Mark Comer. This is a look at anxiety, depression through a biblical and spiritual lens. This is one of his older publications in I think 2011 time. I know that he's still a pastor when he wrote this, and so it's really interesting to read that and then what he would later go on to write. And I'm really interested in him as an author. I would say that this is also one of my favorite authors, that I read his books just because he wrote them, not even just because of the topic, but because anything he writes, I'm invested in hearing. So My Name is Hope was another, I feel like I use the word simple a lot because I love when really big, scary concepts like, anxiety and depression are brought down in this really simple and actionable way, and not in a way that dismisses how pervasive it is, because anxiety and depression is such a big issue of our time. And I wouldn't say that it belittles the conversation, but I would say it simplifies it into a way that it reminds you how God has given us every tool that we need to overcome it. And so I would say if anxiety and depression has ever been a part of your past, present, or future, this would be a great book to pick up. Or if you know someone that considers it a part of their past, present, future, share it with them, because it would be a great resource for them. I feel like it mixes personal responsibility with empathy so well. Like, this book is going to challenge you to take hold of your own mental health, but then it's also going to relate to you in a way that you also know that you're not alone, and that every Christian in some shape or form struggles with their feelings, or depression, anxiety specifically. And so these are the books that I read in March and April. These were such strengthening books. Every single book I feel like I read, even if it's a book that I didn't like as much, it just continued to shape the way that I think and the way that I walk. And I'm so excited to be able to share. And I love that you are benefiting from my post and getting some good recommendations. And I hope that this video helps you get even more.